Hey, welcome today. This is our BPM Company podcast, Experts Checking the Box. Today I'm here with Alexander, Bram, Jimmy, and welcome guys. We're in a very black room. Outside it's super sunny, but inside it's cool and we can focus. So welcome to the studio. Today we'll talk about the hot topic from Pega. It's Pega Constellation. It's the new UI architecture. I know something about it, but these three here are have quite some experience now in this. Alexander, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello, my name is Alex. I'm a senior system architect working with Pega for 7 years now, and for the last 2 years I'm working on the project of one leasing company which is powered by Constellation, and we are doing the fleet contract management system.
And before that, did you also work in the other UI architecture of Pega?
Yeah, of course. Before that, my last experience, I was always working with UI kit for 5 years long.
Yeah, so you can compare it quite well.
Yeah,
but keep it. We're gonna really go in depth today. And then Jimmy, welcome. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I'm Jimmy. I work now for like 3.5 years with Pega, and for me it was bit the other way around. I think my first experience with building UI in Pega was more with Constellation, and then on my second project I work now more with the traditional UI. So yeah, it's nice to see the differences between it. Yeah, and then we can today have a discussion on what we like and do not like about the Constellation.
Yeah, that's good. So you can compare it the other way around. Yeah, that's good. And Bram?
Yeah, my name is Bram. Working with Pega now for around 5 years. First, a little bit of experience with UIKit, then moved to Team Cosmos. We also had that in between. And then at the same leasing company as Alex, I did quite some experience with Constellation. And now at a kitchen retailer, we're trying to implement hybrid mode more and more. So all the related UI topics from the last few years I have some experience with. So
I'm happy that there's a lot of experience in this room.
Yeah.
So let's get started with the first question. And experts checking the box. Yeah, so guys, I'm really interested because I know that the topic of Pega Constellation is talked about a lot. I think it's a really new focus point of Pega. But the challenge maybe I personally have is always to, in one or two sentences, really summarize what is Pega Constellation. And could you tell me in 1 or 2 sentences what's Pega Constellation?
Yeah, Pega Constellation is basically a new approach of Pega system, but in order to build UI, and this approach is based on the React.js technology.
Anything to add?
Yeah, and I think compared to the traditional UI, it's also a new UI architecture that really decouples the UI from the Pega model, so that you can basically independently build different UI experiences, but still based on the same model in Pega.
Yeah, so decouple the model from the UI or the channel itself.
Yes.
And wasn't that happening in the past?
No, I think in the past, I see it as in the Pega model you model the what, and then in the UI you model the how, so how it should present it. And I think in the traditional UI architecture we basically do everything. We determine the what and the how. But I think in the new Constellation architecture we only determine the what, and in the front end the how can be modeled with the different UI components that you can build.
Yeah, so that really supports the multi-channel strategy from Pega, like one brain and multiple channels of way of exposing your application.
Yes. Yeah.
Together there was more than 2 sentences, but anything to add, or is that a complete summary?
I think that's quite a complete summary actually, so
yeah.
Nothing to add from my side on that question.
Yeah, clear. All right, over to the next question. My next question is because it's really new technology, but how is it relevant to you as I think developers? You're working on building applications, deploying them. So Bram, why is it relevant to you?
Yeah, I think what you can all see is that Pega is really pushing this. They're really trying to incorporate this at more and more clients to really separate, as Jimmy just explained, the model from the UI more. So that's already a first reason to, as a developer, to get knowledge about it. It's relevant because more customers will ask questions about it, like what is it, how does it work? And on the other hand, Pega is also really pushing it in the latest versions, Infinity 23, 24. You see more and more about Constellation already for a couple of months/years.
Yeah.
So that's already, for me as a developer, reason to invest some time and get knowledge about it.
And you already invested the time.
Yeah, but of course it's also a bit dependent on, can you work with it hands-on? That really helped me a lot, of course. But I think on the same hand, if you cannot do that at your current project or your current client, you can still get quite some knowledge already on the Pega Academy, and hopefully from this podcast as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
If you look around to your developer world, what do you see? Because it's relevant. Do you also see around you developers getting that knowledge, getting themselves enabled in Constellation?
Yeah, I think more and more. Yeah, I think in the past, in the last few years, the product was maybe not fully ready yet to be used on production. But I think now, definitely since Pega Infinity 23, it's quite mature. So you also see that more customers are now playing around with it, but some customers are even using it at the moment in production. So yeah. It's also because we are using it now that more developers get hands-on experience with it. Yeah. And you also see that Pega adds new missions in the academy that can also help you to understand what Constellation is, and how you can use it in your projects.
Yeah, so it's quite relevant, something you should learn. Agreeing with that? Anything to add?
Yeah, Constellation becomes more clear like with every month when Pega publishing new information about that. But besides that, it's also an approach that you should take into consideration not only as a developer but also as a customer. But for me as a developer, it was quite a good experience in the sense of building functional UI in a more simplified way. And because if we are taking in comparison with UIKit, where you had a lot of things to configure, some sections that you don't have that in the Constellation, but you have more standardized, more granular UI parts that are building your user experience and the user interface, of course. And besides that, it also can work good on the big project and empower the use of project roles like citizen developer, when the people are able to build some UI faster, without a need to have like some real solid knowledge about, for example, React.js.
Yeah, and if I can react on that, because to add on, I think it also helps to standardize more, reuse more, because as you mentioned, it's becoming more and more easy to implement UI. In the Pega system, of course, you can still have your really hands-on and you can do whatever you want in React. But if you just apply it within Pega, I think it really helps you also with upgrades to don't have too many issues related to UI, debugging in your own code is quite convenient, I would say. So yeah, that I think it really helps to standardize and speed up the development process a long time.
Yeah, so for a long time it's easier to upgrade.
Yeah.
Or maybe you also made the transition from the old to the new. Maybe in the old you also had maybe more possibilities from section rules. How did you experience that transition from? Do you feel it's limiting you or?
Yeah, sometimes it of course can be limited, but it depends on it depends also on the complexity of your process, right? And from what our business really needed. But it wasn't for us a big of a problem to find a better way to do the same with the Constellation approach and still keeping the customer happy. So.
And that was for you because you went the other way around from Constellation and more to, let's say, the Team Cosmos.
Yeah.
Did it open up more functionalities or the ports for customization?
Yeah, I really see the benefit in Constellation in that it's more, it forces you to use certain patterns, yeah, and that keeps your UI really consistent. And what you really see with the traditional UI is that there's so much customization in the UI that, yeah, basically, even within my organization, that in every application we are using different patterns to reach the same business outcome, basically.
So inconsistent UI. So
Yeah.
would you say then also the UI quality is better with Constellation because it's more consistent?
Yeah, that's also the benefit is because you have to use these patterns, automatically you also use the best practices that Pega wants you to use. Because you can only model it in one way by adhering to the pattern. And yeah, that is usually also the way that Pega wants you to model it because they created that UI pattern.
There's patterns for a reason.
Yeah, true, yeah.
Yeah, clear. Thanks.
And I think that, yeah, the other benefit of that is that it also helps with upgrading to newer versions of Pega. It's because you have everyone models a certain business outcome in the same way, according to the pattern. And because there is less customization then, that also eases the upgrade.
Yeah, because you use the pattern and it can be easily.
Yeah.
Where you don't have to refactor the UI.
Yeah, and Pega just does a regression test on these patterns themselves. And because if you customize a lot, then Pega doesn't know that you use that custom solution, so they also can't test it when they're upgrading their platform. So in that way, it also really eases upgrading to newer versions.
So consistent UI and future-proof.
Yeah.
Also going to new versions. All right, thanks. Next question. All right, so my question is then, let's say you're in you have an existing application, maybe not Constellation based yet, and you want to, I think the customer, at some point you want to move to Constellation. What are your options to get there? How do you approach it?
Yeah, first of all, I would say for new projects, definitely try to start with Constellation. I think on the long term that makes your life way easier. For existing projects, I think there are a couple of approaches to take. If you want to shift completely to Constellation, then it's going to be a lot of work, I think, because you basically have to rebuild probably your whole UI and also a big part of your data model. But
no migration script.
No, exactly. There's not a migration script or anything, so that's going to be quite some work.
Big bang.
Yeah, then it's quite a big bang. But luckily Pega has some alternatives, so they introduced hybrid mode a couple of versions ago, which I'm trying to implement now as well at my current project. For some use cases that's quite useful, and then you can basically have traditional UI kit cases, for example hybrid mode landing pages to leverage the benefits of Constellation. And Pega is also promoting coexistence more, so you have also Constellation cases within your current application next to the already present UI kit cases, hopefully on Team Cosmos, because then the look and feels the same.
What's the difference between hybrid mode and
a full Constellation?
Yeah, full name.
The difference is that basically your application is still running on traditional UI, but with hybrid mode you're already connecting to the Constellation engine with the X API 2, and then you can basically leverage some of the advantages that Constellation has in their architecture, but not yet, which weren't in UIKit.
Yeah, I also said coexistence. So how do you compare hybrid mode with coexistence, or is that the same thing?
Coexistence is more relevant for your actual cases, I think, and hybrid mode is more relevant, for example, for your landing pages. So for your cases currently without coexistence, I think it's not possible to have Constellation cases within your application next to traditional UIKit. But with the coexistence Pega introduced, I think that will be possible. I haven't played it out with it yet, but probably like in a couple of months at my current project we will try to do that as well.
Yeah, and especially I think if you're using Team Cosmos that has basically the same look and feel as Constellation, that the hybrid mode is probably a good option to start with. Yeah. it's also possible, of course, for UI kit applications, but then maybe the users wouldn't really like it because then the user experience is totally different then you really see the difference between the pages that are built with traditional UI and with the Constellation architecture.
But I would say I think that's also a reason to try, also in your current project, if you have a possibility, try to at least play around with hybrid mode, because it also helps the client, the customer, to already get used to what it will be probably in a couple of years. So yeah,
It helps you getting there in a more gradual way or in steps.
exactly.
Instead of what you said in the beginning, moving once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because for example, my client, they were in the beginning quite skeptical about hybrid mode, and I just heard 1 or 2 weeks ago that they actually made a shift, like, okay, we actually really like it, the way we now approach it. So
yeah, I think also our lead system architect, our client, is also. I think at first, I think when I came into the project, he was still a bit skeptical about it. But since he started to play around with it, you see that he also starting to like it.
yeah,
So it's a bit of cold water fear.
Yeah, I think
If
so.
the feet are in for a while, it feels okay.
it's a warm bath.
How can you get through that cold water fear? It's learning.
Maybe you can explain it, because I think at the start of your first Constellation project, you were also a bit skeptical, right?
Yeah, I was really skeptical about that, and I didn't really realize, what are the advantages. But we also should take in accordance that it was like 2 years ago when client was like the first adapter. It was pre-flight and stuff like that. So the Constellation had some issues, but at current point, like today, vendor fixed a lot of problems, introduced new patterns, which basically makes your life easier when you are working with Constellation. And besides that, also was doing some researches on React.js technology, what are advantages of that technology, and that basically helped me to understand the vendor's way of thinking and the direction they're trying to go to. And besides that, if we're talking about existing project, you also can think about new channels. So for example, if you have a new channel, you can try to implement it with a Constellation. They can coexist, UIKit and Constellation, and in that sense, you can build new channel already on the new UI architecture, which will be basically Constellation, but still having your like other processes and applications which are basically made on the UIKit, keep them running and just being happy. At least you will understand by implementing this new channel on the Constellation whether you are whether you like it or not, and whether you want to go further with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I hear it, there's quite some ways to gradually start step by step, get experience, and then feel it. And also, but still some developers might feel still some cold water fear then.
Yeah,
But if you get it from, would you say you from maybe a bit skeptical,
Yeah,
you're quite optimistic right now?
in the beginning I was really skeptical, but that was also because a lot of things were unavailable. We didn't have some patterns that we are having now, but after time our application was growing and we were doing some interesting stuff with the Constellation. And currently I'm looking quite optimistically. I understand why are we doing that, and what can it bring us in the perspective of next several years.
Yeah. Same for you?
Yeah, I think same for me. I was also quite skeptical in the beginning, also because I think when we started with it, Constellation we were basically early adopters, I think. So there were a lot of child diseases still in the architecture, in the way of working. But yeah, I totally agree with Alex. I think during time, it takes some time to get used to it. Also in the way of thinking as a developer, like how you implement it or how you should model certain things. But over time, it really helped me to understand, like, okay, this is what's going on. This is how we should do it. And also when I now started a new project where we didn't have it, I also saw, okay, there are some problems in the existing UI kit applications which could actually be solved or wouldn't have happened if you would have done it in Constellation. So
Could you give an example there?
now, for example, if you have a lot of custom UI, basically it forces you, or it makes debugging also sometimes a bit complicated because there's a lot of stuff happening on the screen, and in Constellation that's just not in the model anymore. So you have to solve it in a different way, which also forces you as a developer, but also with the business together, to set up your UI or your process completely different. And in my opinion, that made debugging in the end way easier. It gave way less issues when upgrading or when implementing new stories even. So yeah, for me that was really a big advantage that I saw, okay, the benefits are for me more and more clear.
Yeah. Same for you?
Yeah, because also sometimes what you see is that the business comes with a lot of requirements, UI requirements, also complex requirements, but then it's not always a UX best practice that you're implementing then. And then because it's possible in the traditional UI, what you see is that we always say yes, because we build what the customer wants.
Yeah.
But I think the design system approach with Constellation also forces you to challenge the business sometimes. That is this really what you want? Can't we solve it in another way that is possible with the current UI components?
So you have some proven patterns, also less options to customize. So when a specific question comes, it's easier to challenge.
Yeah.
Requirement, or say, hey, I got a really good pattern here, use that one. Think twice before.
Then sometimes the business does have a valid point, yeah, because on the project that I worked on, we sometimes also had to, were forced to build a workaround to get it to work, and then that doesn't feel good because then it really impacts the way you model your solution in Pega, and that shouldn't be the case. So then I think it's just best to either create a custom DX component for that, for which you can use a center of excellence, for example, or you report it to Pega, and then if you really have a valid UX requirement that is missing in the product, then they just have to add it to the Constellation design system.
Yeah, so then it's use the pattern, and if you deviate, think twice before you deviate.
Yeah.
And you also take a conscious decision then, like, oh, I really need this, so I'm deviating, and clear.
But I think it really forces you to first challenge the business on some UI requirements that is not possible with the out-of-the-box components.
Yeah. And in the end, it's also, let's say, the advantage of the customer, because during next upgrades, they can easily, do upgrades, quick upgrades to the next version.
That's always the case if you use out-of-the-box. Then it's always easier to upgrade to newer versions.
Clear. So I think we also said we're talking about the cold water fear. So what would you advise to everybody's watching now, maybe to the people that maybe have still that cold water fear? Where should they get started? Is it first doing a course, building something, do something on community edition, or starting a project? Where would you advise them to get started?
I would first do the course to get the basic understanding, and then what really helped me, because I think when we started there wasn't no course yet, so it was just doing a lot of hands-on experience. So that, I think,
we had to figure out the patterns ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. So I think getting hands-on experience is definitely a must-do, in my opinion. Try to at least try it yourself in your personal edition. If that's not suitable for you, if you don't get enough knowledge about it, try to go to a client where you can actually play around with it and work with it. And it will give some issues now and then. It will give issues to get used to it in the beginning, but I think if you keep that in the back of your mind and really wanting to try to understand what Pega is trying to achieve, and why it helps your customer and yourself as well, I think long term it will become more and more clear. Yeah, so I would say get your hands in the mud, try around with it, play around with it, and that really helped for me. But be aware it can take some time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But it's also a big new
Yeah, exactly.
Direction where it's going to.
Yeah.
Same tip, do a course and then start building.
Yeah, especially now that you have the Constellation Adoption course, which provides really valuable information. Also for me, because before I did the course, I already worked for more than a year with Constellation on the project, but the course still provided a lot of extra knowledge to me that I didn't know about. So
Can you give an example? What's your main takeaway from the course?
Yeah, I think one of the main reasons to do it is to also understand why Pega chose for this architecture. But I think it also gives you some extra knowledge on some debugging options that you have, because debugging is also different from how you do it with on the traditional UI.
How do you debug in the Constellation?
Yeah, so there's a few
Do
options.
you need to debug?
Yeah, of course, you still need to debug, because there can still be things in your model broken, or maybe the UI component is not functioning properly. And then you as a Pega developer need to figure out where the issue is, of course. So it is a bit different in a sense that you don't have the clipboard, because the Constellation.
You don't have the live UI?
Yeah, the Constellation is stateless. So that means that every request that the UI sends via the DX API to Pega starts a new session. So if you have request 1, and then after that you send request 2, then request 2 doesn't know about the clipboard that you had in request 1. So that also causes that you can't use temporary pages anymore.
So where do you start debugging?
So you have to debug in the browser then. So trace the DX API calls from the network tab of your browser. So there's an option. But you can also still use the tracer. If you open the tracer and you do some action on the UI, you see all those DX API calls coming into your tracer in separate threads. And then you can still trace what's happening in your Pega model from there.
So you have to write requests are coming in, responses.
Yeah.
Same for you?
I would also add, besides the course that is available on Pega Academy, it's worth to check the Pega Docs, because there are also a lot of useful information about the Constellation, which is not yet included in any courses. So, for example, if you stuck with something, I would also suggest you to use maybe Pega Buddy to navigate through Pega Docs and find the answers on the question you have. And besides that, we also have, as Jimmy mentioned, debugging is different, so you don't have the live UI, though you have the view rules, which also can be traced from Tracer. You can use the network tab of developer tools, has already been mentioned. And also we have Pega has X-Ray, an additional tool that
browser extension, right?
No, that can be run just from the browser console, and which allows you to understand your view structure, how they're linked to each other, what embedded into what, and stuff like that. So also is quite useful sometimes. And besides that, because Constellation is based on the React.js, you can also use some React.js related tools. For example, Redux. It's Redux DevTools. It's an extension for the browser, which also can give you some insight in how your Constellation UI operates. And besides that, another thing to get know with is the Constellation, the Cosmos design system that Pega has that empowers the material UI. So it's basically also another place to look into to get acquainted with the components Pega has out of the box and how can they be used, what features they have, and how they can be controlled.
Yeah. So it's a few tools within Pega, but also a bit extended from the browser side, doing some debugging. How was that the first time when you worked at Constellation? Because it's quite, I think a lot of developers are used to tracer or maybe looking into the log file. So how much time would you, how is it and how much time do you spend also, let's say, looking in Pega for debugging and in these other tools? So are you mainly working with other tools now?
I think in the beginning it was, I had to get used to it. And I think also in the beginning, because there were a little bit more child diseases still in the Constellation engine itself, it took a bit more time to debug. I think Alex could confirm that right now that the platform is a bit more stable. It actually results in less debugging of the actual engine, but more like your implementation code again.
And now if there's a bug, it's probably your model.
Most likely it's your own model, yeah. And in the beginning it was sometimes the other way around, so that made it a bit complicated. But I think now it's more stable, I would say. Yeah, I don't know, it's not that much more time investment than it was before.
So once you know the tools, it's a different way of working as a developer. You have to get some knowledge, but once you get used to it, it's just a little bit different way of working. But
Yeah.
But it's all right. Now I'm starting to develop in Constellation. Of course, as a Pega developer, you need to learn new skills, some new knowledge, but I heard it's quite positive. It's just a new way of working. But I also heard sometimes it's headless, so then the front end is maybe developed by other people. How does it work out? So does every customer that has Constellation, do they need front-end developers? Do they already have front-end developers? How do you work together? Could you elaborate?
Yeah, I think mostly it depends a bit also on like what's required from a customer perspective. That's a really important question because for me, like for example, if a customer has a client-facing application, I would definitely say you to get a separate React developer who handles the front end for you. And then Pega is just a model, and then you can do whatever you want in React, basically completely separate. But if your application is an internal employee facing, then it's a discussion depending on like what the client wants. Is a lot of customization required? I would say get a React developer or at least someone with React knowledge. But on the other hand, you could also say in Pega you can already do quite a lot if you apply the patterns correctly. But then you probably have to say sometimes a little bit more no to a client, like, okay, no, we shouldn't do it like this, but we can take this approach. So you have to model differently.
And also if you think as a customer, you have a customer-facing application or you want to do specific things, the chance that you also have some front-end knowledge already aboard is also higher.
Yeah, it's likely.
Most likely you also have other
Exactly.
Customer-facing applications.
But
also
what you usually see now is that the customer-facing part of your processes, that it is built in a completely different system. That it doesn't use the Pega model as an orchestrator, that part of the process. And I think that's causing that you also duplicating a lot of business logic in each of these channels. And I think that's probably why Constellation, it's also good to use these front-end developers to build on top of Constellation. Is that you use that front-end knowledge for building your customer-facing UI on top of your Pega model.
Really putting the knowledge in the one brain, in the model of Pega, and then there's no differences in channel or no logic implemented in channel, because that's something. Is that something, by the way, you've seen in your projects? So differences between how the logic was implemented in the channels?
Yeah, I've seen it a lot of times on projects. Yeah, that they had self-service capabilities, and that was basically built in a totally different system. That was more like a Java backend and an Angular or React or Vue frontend for that. Yeah. But then you see that a lot of business logic gets duplicated because you have it in your Pega model, but also in that Java-based application.
Yeah, so more effort, but also different experience for a client logging in. If you make a phone call or you go by self-service, could have different outcomes.
Yeah. And I think a big reason for that is that maybe also the traditional UI, the user experience, if you embed that on the website of the client, is not that great. So that's why a lot of customers chose to not use Pega for the client-facing UI. But now if you use Constellation, then you can also easily apply the design system that your customer is using to the views that you built in your Pega model. So that's the same look and feel as the rest of the website. The only difference is that now the business logic that is used for that view is still in the Pega model.
Yeah. So as a web user, you really get a consistent experience. Yeah. You don't even know if you're talking against the Pega system or whatever system.
You don't even get the feeling that it's built in a different system as the rest of the website.
Right. And for an employee, what does it mean, Alexander? So like an internal user using a Pega Constellation, do they also use the same? Is that the same? Or how does it work out in your projects? Normally I see there's some difference between internal portal, which doesn't always have the high requirements that a web facing has, but does an internal user now automatically also gets really good UX or consistent UX?
Yeah, they can achieve that. I think it definitely can be achievable because if, let's say, you already have some customer-facing channel built on the React.js, that probably means you already have your own design system, your own components, and some other small building blocks that basically makes your own user experience for your end user, and this basically can be incorporated with the Pega, because Constellation, it is a separate server which powered by React.js, and you basically can reuse what you already have in order to achieve the same look and feel, not only for your customer-facing UIs, but also for employee-facing for your Pega.
So you also make employees happy.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a question, but like an end user, let's say I don't know anything about Pega, or I'm using a Pega system. I first work in UIKit, and then I get an application supported by Pega Constellation. How do I feel the difference, or in working with the application? What would be different?
I think more standardized UI. I think it will be, the look and feel will be the same everywhere. I think performance probably.
Explain that. Is it much faster?
Yeah, it's faster, and you also have less interaction with the server, because a lot of things can be handled client side within React. So yeah, that also causes that you have less network traffic.
Yeah, and one more, I think it also, Constellation helps to, for example, if you have a view with a certain task, to not put like a lot of conditions there and a lot of separate tasks conditionalized. I think it forces you to build your model more split up in specific tasks. And therefore I think the UI becomes also more easy to
get used
to and to work with as a user, because the tasks are more standalone, more small. Yeah, I would say that as well as a big difference between what you can do in UIKit, of course.
Yeah, so the application works fast, quick reaction, but it's also easier to do your tasks.
Yeah, smaller tasks. It's not like a big task on your screen. You have to fill in 10 fields, for example, but maybe just 2 or 3, and then you go to the next step, and there you have another 2 or 3. So you can split up your tasks a little bit more, maybe.
Yeah.
So as an end user,
it also really forces you to use the UX best practices, I think, that are used
Yeah, they're there for a reason.
Yeah, true,
yeah.
yeah. So don't try to come up with your own UX best practices, but use the
Yeah,
ones
yeah.
that the experts yeah, define.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you just apply patterns that have worked also good for other users.
And also in Constellation, if there's some pattern missing, then you can still build your custom DX component. But yeah,
Would you say it's needed to have React knowledge for that as a Pega developer?
yeah, if you want to build a custom DX component, then you have to be a React developer then, because yeah, you are the owner of the component then, and that's also again, if you build something custom, then Pega can't test it. So also there is also a risk again when upgrading to a new version of Pega, or if something changes in the DX API, then it could be that your custom component breaks.
Does
Yeah,
it
but it's-
also mean, in your opinion, that as a Pega developer from now on starting to work with Constellation, SDK, etc., that as a Pega developer you should also invest time in getting to know React more and more, or maybe do more of a hybrid role, or is it really standalone for you still?
Yeah, I think it's always good to learn more about it. Yeah, maybe do some course. I think Alex did a quick course, yeah, so I think that's good to do. Yeah, but I think if you really want to build custom components for a customer that need to be used on production, you really need to be an expert. I think so. It needs to be. I believe it needs to be your proficiency.
Yeah.
Alexander, agreeing with that?
Yeah, I agree with that because yeah, indeed I did some small course on React.js just to understand. I was trying to understand what's happening in Pega React.js starting kit SDK, and without React knowledge, that's basically wild forest for me. Yeah, it was really complicated to understand what's happening, and indeed, if you would like to,
Then you also get some respect, right, for the React developers.
yeah,
That's the benefit.
yeah, and if you really would like to build some complex React.js components that can be used in Pega, then I would say that it should be more standalone role, which can be focused on React.js only, because you need to know the Constellation background, what kind of components are already there, and React is always about reuse of what you have and not duplicating your components and logic you have. So it basically should be a separate person who can focus on just building React stuff, rather than me as a Pega developer. I'm focusing on the processing logic, on the case management, on the security and stuff like that. But this part,
It's quite a
better.
specialization.
Yeah.
Let's say there's a front end report on your team. Could you just say like, hey, this is what I need? You have some basic React knowledge. This is what I need. Could you make me a React component? Does that person, that front end, also need to have some Pega knowledge, or
No.
if you have a React specialist, you can.
Yeah,
she can
it
make the
can.
component.
Pega, in order to make a component, Pega also have quite a good guide on the steps. What do you need to do in order to firstly decide whether this component is really needed for you, or you can do it in a better manner using what Pega already provides and what you already have. And another important point is basically you are preparing your roadmap, but that's not only related to Pega, it's in general. When you are working with the React, they have quite a standardized process of how they are building their components. They are doing some kind of stories, what for this component, what kind of APIs.
Storybook.
Yeah, storybook, something like that. Yeah. Let's say if you already have a React.js developer, I think the first requirement prerequisite it will be that he will get he should get know the Pega starter kit or SDK to understand what kind of components are already in the constellation. And afterwards, he should be able to build new component. No additional knowledge will be required.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sounds
what I also understood is because I think with the version 1 of the DX API, a lot of customers that started to use that, they still had to build like their own interpreter. And I think in the new Constellation architecture that is using the version 2, the DX API, that interpreter basically comes already out of the box. It's like a wrapper on top of the DX API. And that also solves the issue that the front-end developer doesn't need to know how the DX API works. Doesn't need to know what data you can get back or what data you need to send to make the request succeed. He only needs to call the APIs that are the front-end APIs that are available then in that wrapper that Pega built.
What I hear is that's quite some
So it's
steps
like a sort of an
taken.
abstraction layer around it, yeah, that makes it easier for front-end developers to interact with the Pega model.
Yeah, without having too much Pega knowledge.
Yeah.
Sounds good. So I hear you have to get started, but it's improving more and more on different parts, and I think that's also future expectation with next release. It's going to be better.
Yeah.
Because we have DX API version 1, version 2. It's also a version 3 expected, or?
I don't expect it now because version 1 was basically the DX API that you could use with still a section-based UI, and version 2 is an enhancement of that, and that works with the view-based UI. So if you model your UI by using the views, then you have to model it in the App Studio.
See, it's all right. Thanks. We're gonna wrap up. It's a lot of information. I think also the topic on customization feels also like a nice topic to dive into more in another podcast. Custom components and when do you need it, and how to build them and who's needed. But thanks for the view there. All right, we're gonna wrap up. Yeah, I think this podcast we discussed a lot of stuff around Constellation. I knew, of course, quite some stuff, but I really heard the experts talking here. For me, it was a good experience to bring it together, and I hope for you the same. But what's your like we discussed a lot of things, but if people what's your final takeaway from what we discussed today around Constellation? What would you address?
I would say get knowledge about it, try to play around with it, because it's getting more and more important. I think it will be more and more applied to different projects. Accept the fact that it might take a while to get used to it, but also try to see continuously to see the benefits, look for the benefits, and trying to really understand like what's going on. That would, for me, to everyone out there, be a first call to action, I would say. Also, in order to give an answer to your clients, like because clients asking like, what is it, how do I apply it, etc., etc. It's good to have an answer. So, as a developer, I would say go invest time in it. And try to find as much knowledge about it as possible, because that really helps everyone in the end, I think.
Yeah, and what I heard today, it's where the future is going to, and you all had that path already, and quite positive. So
yeah,
that's a good one. Jimmy, what's your takeaway, or what's?
Yeah, I agree with Bram. Just gain knowledge about it. Yeah, play around with it in your community edition or do the mission on the academy. I think that's the first step. And then if you want to adopt on your project, I would suggest to start small, yeah, like we're also doing now on our current project with the hybrid mode. But yeah, I would also say it's also important to upgrade to the latest versions of Pega, because then Constellation, I think in Infinity 24 for sure, is really mature. So if you're on that version, then I'm sure you won't run into lots of limitations anymore.
Yeah, so better go to the latest version with the most mature Constellation basis.
Yeah.
All right. Alex?
Yeah, Constellation definitely worth to be explored. But besides that, I would say that if you already have some implementation, some cases, processes, or those on the UI kit and you are happy with how it works, I don't think there is a big need to rush and to try to refactor it to build something new on the constellation. I think it's better to firstly carefully explore it, and if you will decide that you would like to try it, try to do that on the new channel. This way you will be able to get to know better with the constellation patterns, how it should work, and yeah, maybe afterwards, if you decide that yeah, some of your UI kit implementation can work faster and you can achieve more advantages using Constellation, probably then you can try to rebuild something from the UI kit on Constellation. Yeah.
Yeah, or first try it with a new case type that is on the roadmap, and that doesn't have too much complex UI requirements.
Yeah.
That is also an option now since I believe Infinity 23 is to use the coexistence. So then you have your application still on traditional UI, but you can build a case type in that application by using Constellation, the Constellation architecture.
And I think you addressed actually my takeaway then from listening today, but it's also you don't have to go big bang. So you get some knowledge, get started, get some experience, and gradually start approaching it. You don't have to go big bang or rebuild your own UI.
Yeah.
So there's ways to make steps, and my main takeaway is if you do that after 1 or 2 years, from skeptical, you might become very optimistic. So I think we have 3 experienced experts here that also are very positive. So that's my takeaway. So I should get started today.
You should. What are you waiting for, Maarten?
Thank you. Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks, Bram. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Gonna wrap it up. And ready? Thanks for watching this Experts Checking the Box. If you want to subscribe to our channel below on YouTube, and hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.